Part 20. The Prince is Very Fierce. Author, Guan Zi. Chapter 191. Thunderbolt. The lightning dragon swam in the black sea of clouds, and the dragon flag fluttered in the wind and rain. On the white jade square where the rain was drizzling, more than a dozen knife marks were left in place. Two figures stood opposite each other, one with a spear and the other with a sword pointing diagonally at the ground, 20 steps apart from each other. There were crowds of people in front of the Taiji Hall, but at this moment, it seemed as if the whole world had quieted down, with only two figures standing solemnly in the rain. Zhou Yizi held the sword in one hand, his eyes locked on Su Buling's knees and shoulders, trying to catch the signs that ordinary people could not detect. Su Buling's face was stern, he just stretched out his left hand and hooked his fingers. "Hit faster, I can't hold on for long." He. Zhou Yizi's smile was instantly ferocious, his black clothes suddenly swelled, the bricks and stones under his feet cracked again, and a crisp sound containing power was made. His figure was as fast as thunder, and the long sword pierced through the rain curtain. In the blink of an eye, he had rushed out 10 steps away. For the first time since Su Buling came to this world, he didn't care about the dragon locking poison on his body. He had swallowed pills and strong liquor before he died. As for how long he could hold out, he really didn't know. But it should be enough. This was also a desperate battle for him. He was fighting to the death. This was the only way to detoxify. Ka. With a crisp sound, it suddenly exploded in the white jade square. Su Buling, who was still standing there just now, suddenly disappeared from Zhou Yizi's sight, leaving only 2 pits in the rain on the ground that had not yet closed. Zhou Yizi's face suddenly changed, and he stabbed the air with a sword and suddenly turned over and rolled to the side. Ah! The howl spread throughout the palace. The whole audience looked at the white-clothed figure who suddenly appeared in the air, holding a spear with both hands and waving like a full moon, and smashed down to the ground with astonishment. The spear tip seemed to split the rain curtain, and the falling raindrops exploded when they touched the sharp blade, and the fine-textured prince's robe on his body was almost torn. Snap! The broken stones flew, shaking up the rainwater condensed on the ground. A spear slammed into the ground, and the white jade bricks instantly broke into pieces. Zhou Yizi forced himself to turn over and dodge. When he looked back and saw this scene, he felt his hair stand on end. However, he was also a hero among men, and he did not hesitate to slash Su Buling's right arm holding the spear with a sword. After Su Buling landed, he did not make any movement to relieve the force. He relied on his physique to resist the reaction force of inertia. At the same time as the long sword attacked, he had already swung it horizontally, and it was the last to arrive and hit Zhou Yizi's waist. Bang! A muffled sound came out in the rain curtain, and Zhou Yizi's body was swept out in an instant, breaking through the rain curtain in a twisted posture that was almost broken. In an instant, he flew more than 3 feet away, slid a long way on the slippery ground, and stopped only when he hit a lamp post. Good! Exclamations were heard everywhere. Almost everyone stood up, with indescribable astonishment in their eyes. Zhang Xiang took a few steps forward, and it seemed that he did not see the action clearly. Eunuch Jiao was originally concentrating, but he was stunned at this moment, frowning, with some disbelief. The other civil and military officials did not see the action clearly at all. They only knew that when Su Buling landed, Zhou Yizi flew out and slid a long way on the ground, completely losing the unstoppable look just now. This. Even Chen Xian, the envoy of Northern Qi, was full of disbelief. He knew that Zhou Yizi's fighting power was unique among the younger generation and almost invincible. Su Buling was restricted by the dragon locking goo, and he could not exert his full strength even if he ignored it. Now he hit Zhou Yizi like catkins in the wind with one blow. If he was in his prime, who in the world could stop him? Is this a human? The Queen Mother was stunned on the spot with eyes full of infatuation. She was very anxious just now, but now she seemed to have forgotten everything. She just opened her mouth and didn't even notice the rain splashing on her clothes. Su Buling retracted his long spear, tilted his head to look at Zoyzi, who was half kneeling on the ground and coughing, and said in a flat voice, "That's it?" Unfortunately, a mouthful of blood oozed out from the corner of his mouth as soon as he finished speaking. Su Buling raised his snow-white sleeves to wipe it, not caring at all. Seeing this scene, the audience's just excited mood suddenly sank again. Su Buling is really risking his life. The Queen Mother came back to her senses and said anxiously, "Stop fighting, stop." Unfortunately, they have already entered the field and no one is lying down, so there is no reason to stop halfway. Zoyzi spat out a mouthful of blood foam, climbed up from the ground, and stood up again with a sword in hand, his face a bit crazy. "Good guy, it's a pity that you are disabled, otherwise I would have an opponent in this life. You are worthy." Su Buling's eyes were slightly cold, and his body once again broke through the rain curtain, like a cheetah attacking by surprise. In the blink of an eye, he was in front of Zoyzi, and the spear tip swept across, and a black blade cut through the rain curtain. Zoyzi had just experienced the inhuman strength, and had no intention of using the sword to block it. He ducked and rolled sideways to avoid the spear tip, and the long sword in his hand was like a poisonous snake spitting out its tongue, stabbing Su Buling's lower abdomen in an extremely tricky way. Snap! The black spear tip swept past the lamppost without any hindrance. While Su Buling turned around to avoid the sword tip, he stepped hard on the ground, rushed out again, and hit Zoyzi's arms with his shoulder. Bang! The extremely powerful stick mountain lean hit the chest and abdomen. Zoyzi flew several feet away again like an arrow, fell on the ground and slid backwards. The white stone lamppost slid down at an angle and smashed to pieces on the ground. Good. Cheers rose up, covering Su Buling's cough. Su Buling ran quickly, and with the original intention of a quick victory, he approached Zoyzi, who had not yet climbed up. For the first time since he was a child, Zoyzi showed a look of horror in his eyes. He threw out the long golden rope in his sleeve while sliding backwards, entangled the lamppost in the distance, and pulled his body over. Snap! The next second, the 2-foot spear tip landed at the place where Zoyzi should have stopped, and nailed more than 3 inches into the stone slab. Before it was over, the spear tip twisted and the stone slab broke into pieces. Su Buling, wearing a blood-spattered white robe, had bloodshot eyes and bulging veins on his forehead. He still angrily broke through the rain curtain and once again forced Zoyzi, who had difficulty even standing up and regrouping. In the Taiji Hall and the 4 sides of the imperial city, everyone stood up, their eyes full of disbelief, but they couldn't say a word, staring blankly at the 2 voices crossing the square in front of the hall at a very fast speed. Songji, the only one still sitting on the dragon chair, held the teacup tightly in his hand, concentrating, but a little absent-minded. Bang bang bang. The loud noise echoed with the muffled thunder, and the rain and the sound of breaking wind intertwined. Wherever the long spear passed, bricks, stones and lampposts were all shattered. The only things that dared to stand in front of it were probably the city walls and mountains. 1 against 1,000, this is not just a boast by the people in the martial arts world. Zoyzi was shocked. He didn't even have the chance to stand up straight, let alone use his sword. If he stopped, he would definitely be cut in 2. He could only run away and delay time until Su Buling couldn't hold on any longer. Bang bang bang. The long boots stepped on the rainy ground, leaving a string of blood beads. Before the blood beads fell to the ground, the figure was already several feet away. Ah! With a thunderous roar, Su Buling smashed the stone steps of the imperial road with a spear. Zoyzi was forced to the high platform outside the Taiji Hall. He had no way to retreat, so he could only throw out the golden wire rope to entangle the white jade fence above. It was at this moment Jia Gong and several secret guards appeared at the same time and blocked Songji. Because the two people had already hit Songji's feet. The prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 192. Swish. Zouyizi yanked the golden rope, rose up from the ground, and jumped directly onto the fence. Without stopping for a moment, he bounced up again. The next moment, the fence carved with stone lions broke in the middle. Su Buletinling stuck his spear on the platform and fell down. The pole bent into a fully drawn strong bow. Then he stepped on the wall and the pole bounced straight again. Pierced the rain curtain and rushed upward again. Wow! The whole place was shocked. Zouyizi jumped into the air and stepped on the imperial umbrella above the emperor. Before he could stop, Zhang Feng came behind him again. He had to force himself to bounce up again. The golden rope in his hand was hung on the corner of the first floor eaves of Taiji Hall. Wow! Su Buling came one after another, crushed the imperial umbrella with one foot, followed closely behind, inserted his spear into the beam of Taiji Hall, and flew up again, like a maggot attached to the bone, leaving no room for Zouyizi half a moment to breathe. This. All the civil and military princes and generals in the audience stood dumbfounded. Songji stood up from the dragon chair that was soaked by the heavy rain, walked to the edge of the high platform in front of the palace, and looked up. Bang bang bang. The black tiles on the first floor shattered one after another. Zouyizi jumped directly to the top of Taiji Palace. There was no way to go. He gritted his teeth and took advantage of Su Buling's head coming out of the eaves. He raised his hand and stabbed behind with his sword. After procrastinating for so long, Su Buling must have run out of gas and energy. If he fights now, he has a much better chance of winning. Unfortunately, the sword hit nothing, and Su Buling did not appear immediately this time. Zouyizi's face was full of caution and he didn't dare to look out. But thousands of people below saw Su Buling standing on the eaves of the first floor, holding his chest and vomiting blood. The bulging blood vessels had turned purple and black. No. His Royal Highness the Crown Prince. Little Prince. There were exclamations everywhere, and I wanted to dissuade him, but I didn't know how to speak. Songjia raised his hand, but before he could say anything, the scolding exploded again. Ah! Zouyizi frowned and carefully observed what to do outside the eaves. Suddenly, there was a sudden chill under his feet, and he threw himself to the side without thinking. Bang! The large tiles above the Taiji Palace exploded, and a long stick penetrated from below. The figure followed closely and knocked open the top of the hall. As pieces of tiles and wood flew away, Su Buling stabbed Zouyizi's calf, which was moving a little slower. Because he was caught off guard, Zouyizi reacted quickly enough, but still left a bloody mouth on his calf. If he had been half a minute slower, the entire foot might have been cut off. Zouyizi held his hands on the roof of the hall, ignoring the severe pain in his legs. After turning over and landing, he violently stepped on the tiles with one foot. He rushed back directly, holding swords in both hands, and drove towards Su Buletin at an unprecedented and terrifying speed. Make the chest and abdomen. Su Buletinling's mouth was full of blood, his eyes were almost ferocious, and he advanced instead of retreating. His figure rose from the ground in an instant and jumped into the sky. Taiji Palace is the tallest building in Chang'an. Within the imperial city, on the streets of Chang'an, if you move your gaze here, you can see a small black dot appearing under the sky and above everything in the rain. And Su Buling also found that the bird's eye view of Chang'an from this place is really magnificent. Ah! Thunderbolt! Screams and thunder sounded at the same time. Su Buletinling held the spear behind his back with both hands, then dropped it from the sky and smashed it down. Zouyizi's sword missed, and for the first time he advanced instead of retreating, rushing directly below Su Buling. So what if we exchange our lives for lives? Prince Su, if you trade your life with anyone with this status, the other party will not lose. And dying together on the top of the imperial city can be said to be the greatest honor for a martial artist. Zoya's eyes were full of madness, and he stabbed out with his long sword. He had no way to hide, and he was exchanging his life for his life. It's a pity that Su Buling didn't come to die. In a desperate situation, Su Buling made a desperate move to change his life without hesitation. He seemed completely unprotected from the blow, but when he induced Zoya to trade his life, he changed his tactics. Zoya was unable to move in the air, so he tried to split his body in two, but also stabbed the sword in his hand into Su Buling's chest. Su Buling, however, retracted his long sword halfway and swept away the sword edge. At the same time, he stepped directly down on Zoya's chest. Bang! Zoya's eyes were filled with confusion. By the time he came to his senses, it was already too late. The sword in his hand was slapped away, and the heavy blow on his chest caused him to fall down and hit the roof below. The tiles and beams below cracked, and a stream of blood sprayed onto the white robe covered with rainwater. Zoya's chest was obviously dented a bit, his eyes widened and he wanted to raise his sword to fight back, but the sharp edge still quietly came to his throat, pierced the skin, and stopped abruptly. Da-da-da. Big raindrops fell on the roof and faces. Zoya froze on the spot, looking at Zhang Feng in front of him and the young man at the end of Changjiang, with a bit of disbelief in his eyes. Su Buling stood on the ridge of the Tai Chi Hall, holding a stick on Zoya's throat with one hand. His face was sickly and purple, but he had no expression at all. "Are you convinced?" Zoya's body trembled slightly, the shock in his eyes suppressed the pain in his chest, he gritted his teeth and swallowed the blood foam. "You are dead, no matter how powerful you are." Su Buling's eyes were cold. "You can't even touch the corner of my clothes, but you still deserve to care about my life and death." Zoya gritted his teeth, hesitated for a long time, and then let go of the sword in his hand. 10 years later, if you are still alive, I will definitely come to find you. If you want to come, you can come anytime. Su Buling loosened his boots, turned around and looked at the place where the northern Qi envoys gathered below, and said the same thing. Next. The whole place was silent. Everyone looked up at the top of the Taiji Hall, which was the most common scene in the martial arts world, but also the most exciting scene. One stood, the other lay down. Good. The shouts were like a tide, drowning out the sound of thunder and rain. At this time, everyone forgot everything else, just stood below and cheered, and many civil officials even burst into tears. Song Yufu, who had already turned pale in the crowd, became quiet at this time, leaning against the pillar and staring blankly. She thought they were very close to each other, but now she felt out of reach. He is the man in heaven. Su Danking had set up the painting table at some point, and he was excited and writing quickly, as if he was afraid of missing any details in the Taiji Hall. The Queen Mother had collapsed on the palace maid, her eyes were red, her lips were trembling, but she didn't know what to say. Chen Xian, the envoy of Northern Qi, only brought Zoya, who was going out for the first time, with him this time. There were no other good players. Judging from the current situation, going up would be a death sentence, so he stood up and bowed respectfully. Su Buling thrust his long spear into the top of the hall, looked down at the Emperor of Daio below, raised his hand and bowed respectfully. "Your Majesty, the face of Daio has been taken back by my Su family." Song Ji stood with his hands behind his back, clenched his hands tightly, and nodded gently. The next moment, a mouthful of blood spurted out. Su Buling's body shook a few times, and he fell directly from the top of the hall, and he had lost consciousness in mid-air. "Ah! Little prince!" Everyone was scared, and the court officials and palace maids and eunuchs rushed to him in a hurry. With indescribable amazement in his eyes, Jia Gong floated up silently, caught Su Buling in midair and fell down again, quickly sealed the meridians and acupoints with silver needles, and ordered, "Quickly call the imperial physician over." The palace maids, eunuchs, and secret guards hurried over and carried Su Buling down for treatment. The queen mother hurriedly followed the imperial physician down. Songji shook his head and sighed, and ordered, "Treat him well and make sure to save the life of Prince Su." Then, he left the Taiji hall with the eunuchs. The rest of the people still kept their eyes on the top of the Taiji hall, and they didn't come back to their senses for a long time. A long spear stuck in the rain, reminding everyone that what had just happened was not an illusion. Xiao Chuang stood with his hands behind his back. After a long time, he sighed faintly. He is so loyal and brave, he is worthy of the name of Su family. Lu Chang'an shook his head. He was a genius of his generation, but he was killed by a villain. What a pity. After a long time, until the rain stopped, the clouds and fog dissipated, and the sun shone on the Taiji hall again. The long spear was still inserted on the top of the Taiji hall, like a dragon roaring to the sky. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 193. 14,000 words, equivalent to 7 chapters. I am so tired. It has been a week since it was put on the shelves. Thank you for your support. I can do my best to update it. Well, I will clear all the debts as soon as possible. Because there is no manuscript left, the next few chapters will be updated a little slower, about 10 chapters, mainly the story of the lone wolf chasing the phoenix, and then the second volume will end. Please give me more recommendation votes and monthly votes. Thank you Lu Lingzuo, for the leader reward. Thank you Chengshen 123 for the 30,000 reward. Thank you Cik Wang Xiao Yi Shui Han Jiaxuan Qin Su Yisen Mom said I look like Sanlu Duo Lumu for the 10,000 reward. Many thanks to the following big guys for their rewards. Name is Real Male Wife. Xiao Luoluo. Multiption. The prince is not fierce. I let you suffer. Prince, don't do it. Paper Drunk Beauty. Book Friend 202004061711436674. Dark Glass Cat. Kagai. Mujian Lai Harry Birkin. Book Friend 2018-052-7001. Miss Sale. Wind Dusk. Maju Siking. Farewell. Helen June. Pangu Ziu. A Scene of Morning and Evening. Book Friend 201907142122035547. Fly Coffee. When the City is Full of Flowers. In the Mess of the Shells. Ha One Punch a Crying Monster. Julong Xianking. Wingmand. Xiaodong 126. Fly Coffee. Xiaobai. Funny. Middle. Book Friend 201907142122035547. Book Friends 201908090121089224. Wolf Girl is Mine. Abyss Heavy Truck. A boat full of clear dreams, pressing the stars. Bamboo Leaf Green Plate Green Leaf Bamboo. Book Friends 201808171720019994. Book Friends 202007071302076667. A Lonely City. Quinny. K. My heart is hurting. Mianan. Where is the warm sun not overshadowing the dust? SpongeBob Draven. Xiaodong 126. Singing a Parting Song. Book Friends 201902201654056778. Book Friends 201907142122035547. Whatever may be Yingxiao. What to do? Rui. Book Friends 201912040053288840. Abyss Heavy Truck. Fantasy doesn't cost money. Book Friends 202005202038533160. You are so handsome again today. Yu Huang Huang. Ying Yu. Our memories of that year. The show Princess of the Router. San Lang is a good man. Uncle Ike. Book Friends 202007031835579094. Book Friends 2020031520202631. Wolf Sister is mine. Crows bid farewell. Look at good books and love to read. 168 lights in 1,000 houses. Tao who eats melons. Kamajo Shishan. Hazy twilight away. Pity me in the book famine. Summer begins, summer ends, summer does not feel. Dream shadows become layers. Heroic plans dominate every night. Meow lion and tiger. Where am I and who am I? Fly coffee. Pangazio. Book Friends 202007050811237112. Nanhua Old Things. 2 File. Yuchen Ruoxiu. Yao Yao Huayueshan. No one is young again 6. The Frog That Destroys the World. Yangchuo Ginseng 258. Crimson Moon Shen. Wife lives in Yungziu. Flying stars spread hatred, the Milky Way is far away and dark. In the red dust of the world. Stranger Road Si. The moon is cold and the oil lamp is out. Afraid of being found. Xiao Menga 233. Chen 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 Chenerde. Eat fish slightly. Ziani Ungyuhi. Someone is handsome. Jianu Chestnut Gentleman. Dance another 200 dances. You are starting to cry. Book Friend 202006241342333586. Chicken Lord Muriki. Chin Su Yaisin. Smile wrong. Very fierce and cute. Li Baiyu. The Little Prince of Mathematical Analysis. Book Friend 201911202057500934. Live like summer flowers, zero die like autumn leaves. Book Friend 1701092149191979. A boat full of clear dreams presses the galaxy. Qiujiao ride. Lu Lingzuo. Qiujiao driving. Forget the moon of poetry. The fairy in the sky holds the moon. Yeshui contains Jiexuan. Old House Tangdong People. Written by Su Ming. White clouds remember to go home. Why pray for Nian Nian? The moon is like a ditch. Dreaming broadcaster. Rainy night with a knife. Bis of cerebral palsy. Little brother who loves to show off. This is a bad name. Unhine. The breeze is drifting. Ryerdo 1943. Kamajo Shishan. Blue Nightmare Cloud. Ship today too. Messy in the shells. King Tongi. Mumian Degree. Hunting Shadow Eve. 56 Miyato. The moon is sparse. Rag sucks. This is a ruthless person. Ancient Gentleman. Lanja Drunkard 1. A little alpaca. Up and down together for 5,000 years. Ipkai. Hundreds of thousands of people. There is a young man in the book. Fireworks black. Nail last. Words don't express the meaning. Ibuki is my wife. Thanks to the readers on QQ Reading for the tips. Because I didn't see the reminder, I only found the 2 big guys X and 20. Please forgive me if you didn't see them. If you guys tip, you can give Aunt Lou a gift. The fan value is the same. If you accumulate a little bit, you may be able to save up enough for a birthday. Thank you for your support. The Prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 194. Hurry up, hurry up. Silver needle. Towel, towel. Noisy and chaotic footsteps. 4 or 5 medical masters who are very important in Chang'an walked back and forth in a side hall of Taiji Palace. The smell of medicine, blood, and coughs attracted everyone's attention. Even the palace maids who didn't know any medical skills could see that Su Buling was really seriously injured. He couldn't pretend to be so fragile. The Queen Mother knew some medical skills. At this time, she stood at the door of the room, holding the partition with her hands. She couldn't bear to look away, but she was afraid of making mistakes. She bit her lower lip and stared at him. After several times, her eyes were already blurred with tears. The national prestige is ahead, why should the sons of my Su family cherish their death? The cold voice was still in my ears at this time. Everyone can shout out their ambitions, but how many men in the world are really brave enough to die? I thought Su Buling had been tortured by the poison and had lost his mind, forgetting that his last name was Su and that he was a descendant of Su Lai. But now it seems. The Queen Mother pursed her lips and looked at the face that was purple, but never showed any pain from beginning to end. Her heart was full of thoughts, but she was speechless. Tap, tap, tap. The chaotic footsteps filled the whole room. Someone ran in anxiously and left quickly. Songji also came to visit once. Seeing this scene, he was silent for a long time, and left only when the imperial physician said that his life was fine. But his life was fine, but the cold poison had already taken effect and it was difficult to suppress it with alcohol. No one knew whether he could stand up alive, and he might suffer from the pain of thousands of ants biting his heart all the time. Most of the people who were infected with the dragon-locking goo went crazy because they couldn't bear the pain of the poison, and were sent away by their brothers or committed suicide. The Queen Mother only hoped that the poison had not taken effect to that point, but Su Buling's bloodshot eyes could not deceive people. There is no cure, no cure. How can there be no cure? The Queen Mother held her phoenix skirt tightly and paced back and forth in the room, thinking of all the ways she could think of, but they were all rejected by the imperial doctors one by one, because Su Buling had been in the capital for a year and had already tried them. The sun and the moon passed, from heavy rain to sunlight pouring from the sea of clouds, and then to the sky full of stars rising on the branches. The Queen Mother stood outside the sickbed helplessly and with some expectation, hoping that Su Buling would stand up later, just like when he was waiting for her in the corridor in the morning. He looked back and smiled, with sunshine in his gentle and elegant manner. It was a pity that he still saw a haggard face, so weak that people dared not even breathe a little harder. The footsteps back and forth gradually disappeared, and the room became quiet. Chiao Yi walked carefully to the back and whispered, "Mrs. Lu is here to pick someone up, you go and comfort her, otherwise." The Queen Mother woke up with a deep sense of self-blame in her eyes. Yes, what should Hongluan do? Buling was brought here by her, but she turned out like this. The Queen Mother was a little scared, and she didn't even dare to see Madame Lu. But at this moment, Madame Lu must be more desperate than her. If she didn't stop her, Hongluan might do something stupid. The Queen Mother's panic-stricken face gradually showed some calmness. She bit her lower lip and turned around to comfort Hongluan. But when she turned around, she found that Su Buling's fingers moved slightly and hooked at her. The long night was silent, and it seemed that even the lanterns were gray. In the huge room, Su Buling took off his shirt and lay flat on the sickbed, with a wet towel covering his forehead. His eyes looked up, and even his eyelashes didn't move, but that pale hand really hooked. The Queen Mother suddenly froze, and was a little confused before she reacted. This is asking her to come over. Bulletin Ling. 100%. The Queen Mother showed panic, walked quickly to the bedside and half squatted, gently holding the cold hand, carefully looking at Su Bulletin Ling's cheek, and said softly, "What's wrong? Does it hurt? I'll call the imperial physician over now." Huh. Su Buletinling exhaled slightly and opened his mouth, but he couldn't hear what he said. The Queen Mother was a little anxious, and she stood up to call the imperial physician over, but found that her hand was pulled. The Queen Mother's body was slightly stiff, and she turned her head to look at the pale big hand holding her wrist. In such a weak situation, I don't know how much strength it used. Buletinling. The Queen Mother panicked, and quickly squatted again, gently holding the hand. Seeing Su Buletinling wanted to say something, she leaned down and put her ear to Su Buletinling's mouth. If you have anything to say, just tell me, don't worry. Su Buletinling's eyes were a little clearer, and the words that only the two of them could hear were transmitted to the Queen Mother's ears. In the huge palace, there seemed to be only the slight sound of the breeze blowing through the palace. The Queen Mother leaned over to Su Buling's mouth, listening nervously, but after a while, her face suddenly changed, her long eyelashes trembled slightly, and she wanted to stand up, but Su Buling held her hand tightly until she finished speaking. This. The Queen Mother's eyes showed a bit of panic. She let go of her hand and stood up, stepped back a few steps, and looked at Su Buling with some anger in her eyes. But after seeing Su Buling's weak appearance, for some reason, the heart that should have been angry and disgusted, could not get angry. Queen Mother, I didn't want to say it. Su Buling's voice was a little louder, and he tried to turn his head and look into the Queen Mother's eyes. It's just, there's no way. The Queen Mother tightly grasped the hem of her skirt, her eyes were full of repulsion, and she wanted to shake her head, but she couldn't move. Su Buling turned his head back, still looking up, his voice weak and flat. Life and death are determined by fate, wealth and honor are determined by heaven. If the Queen Mother doesn't want to, I won't force it. If the Queen Mother is willing, I will repay her with the rest of my life. At the end of the speech, she gradually lost her voice, closed her eyes, and seemed to stop breathing. Buling. The Queen Mother's face was panicked, and the confusion just now was washed away. She ran to the front and squatted down, holding Su Buling's hand anxiously to check. The pulse was so weak that it would fall down if the wind blew, and only a trace of life was left. The Queen Mother stood up again and stepped back a few steps. She had always been calm and composed, but now she had difficulty thinking. She just looked at Su Buling's face, and her eyes kept changing between determination and entanglement. Tap tap tap. After an unknown amount of time, a mournful cry sounded outside the palace. Linger was heart-wrenching, full of despair and helplessness. Madame Lu. The little prince is fine, please don't disturb the little prince. Help Madame Lu quickly. The cry stopped abruptly, and it was as quiet as if there was no one there, but the oppression could be felt even through the thick palace walls. The Queen Mother stood in the room blankly, in a daze, and could only see the shadows of the palace maids and the imperial doctors walking around, watching Su Buling being carried to the sedan chair and lying down, watching Madame Lu forcing herself to keep a smile, holding Su Buling's hand and comforting him, watching the room gradually become empty. From beginning to end, Su Buling never opened his eyes again. Pada. The Queen Mother sat limply on the ground, looking at the empty sickbed, unable to come back to her senses for a long time. The prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 195. Your child, it's okay, you'll be fine in a few days. The intermittent voice echoed in the car, trying to keep it calm, but it was difficult to conceal the trembling of the voice and the extremely painful sadness in its heart. The carriage moved very slowly, without any bumps. There were servants cleaning and filling the front of the long street road at all times, for fear of making the slightest mistake. Su Buling never fainted, lying half dead without moving. Today seems really tragic, but it doesn't last long. The poison has not yet entered the heart and lungs, so I can still resist it. However, if the poison is not detoxified, I may have to lie down for a year and a half to get rid of the root cause of the disease. Mrs. Lu sat on the couch and used her legs as a pillow for Su Buling to lean on. Even though she tried hard to hold back, tears rolled down from her eyes and fell on Su Buling's cheeks. Mrs. Lu hurriedly picked up the handkerchief and carefully wiped the tears on Su Buletinling's face. She saw Su Buletinling looking at her with a trembling voice of comfort. "Your Majesty, close your eyes, take a good rest, ugh. Don't cry." "Well, don't cry." Mrs. Lu's voice was choked and she shook her head, her eyes full of panic. Don't talk, don't talk." Su Buling smiled and leaned on his soft legs, close to Mrs. Lu's belly. The faint fragrance spread to the tip of his nose, and it seemed that even the pain on his body was relieved a little. "I'm fine." "You also said." Mrs. Lu's cheeks were paler than Su Buling's, and her lips were almost bitten. She felt a lot of blame, confusion, heartache, and anger in her heart, but she couldn't say anything at this moment. She just sat carefully, not even touching her. "Dare." Su Buling looked at the soft cheeks above. Although part of his sight was blocked by the high skirt, Mrs. Lu looked really beautiful from this angle, but those eyes made people feel distressed. "I'm really fine, I'll be fine in a few days." Su Buling wanted to sit up, but Mrs. Lu was frightened. She gently pressed her shoulder. Don't move, we'll be home soon, don't move." Su Buletinling smiled helplessly, held Mrs. Lu's hand, sighed quietly, and closed his eyes honestly. The carriage passed through the 3 octagonal archways on Kuishao Street. At this moment, Chang'an City was already in a state of explosion, and the scenes that happened during the day had reached everyone's ears. Compared with what Su Buling did, the title of King Kui was not worth mentioning. It was neither worthy of the death-defying spirit of a warrior nor worthy of his outstanding skills in front of the Tai Chi Palace. If it weren't for the evildoer's dragon-locking poison, it wouldn't be unreasonable for Su Buling to be number 1 in the world. After all, no matter how powerful the number 1 in the world is, in terms of achievements and style, it is impossible to compare with Yi Chi Jueshan, who is at the top of the Tai Chi Palace today. On the way back from the carriage, half of the warriors in Chang'an City gathered on the roadside. Apart from admiration, they could only sigh. Outside Kuishao Street, many well-known figures in the world came after hearing the news, ranging from Chen Daoping and Sidu Yueming to Chen Ziyi, Yang Ping, Zhu Manlong, and even shopkeeper Sun went abroad in advance, carrying a Tanjiu came over and took a look. This is what warriors are like. No matter what happened in the past, if they dare to die for the sake of the country, they are worthy of being called heroes and worthy of admiration by people in the world. The carriage slowly entered the Bajiao archway. Lao Xiao, who greeted him, only accepted the wine sent by shopkeeper Sunday. Su Buling did not show up. Outside Prince Su's mansion, many princes, and ministers on the same street also came to greet them, but they were all kicked away by Mrs. Lu. The guards and maids carried Su Buling into the back house of the palace and put him down in the already tidied bedroom. The imperial doctor who followed him from the palace began to check his body again. Mrs. Lu stood alone at the window, looking at the young master lying on the bed in the room. For some reason, memories of the past suddenly came to her mind. Keep up with. That was how it was back then. She stood outside the window, watching the strange husband being treated as he was dying, and she also hoped that he would get better. But God always seems to be jealous of talents, and brings a sudden end to a person's high spirits when they should be most high-spirited. It can't happen again. Mrs. Lu unknowingly burst into tears, biting her lower lip, and wanted to cry loudly and scold God for being unfair. But when she saw Su Buling looking at her from the corner of her eye, she put on a little smile, even though her heart felt like it was as uncomfortable as a knife, and it took a lot of effort to breathe. Boom. Boom, boom. Before I knew it, it was already the 3rd watch. The imperial doctors all went to the outer house to rest, and the maids took turns waiting in the surrounding rooms to be summoned. Ning Yuhi, who was temporarily staying at Xiao's house, also came once, but could not say anything except a soft sigh. In the dead of night, Mrs. Lu walked into the room and sat down on the small stool next to the curtain. Her eyes never moved away for a moment, for fear that if she took one less look, Su Buling would be the same as before and would never be seen again. "Madam, go down and have a rest. Your servant will just take care of the young prince." Yunu stood at the window and called softly. Mrs. Lu shook her head, pursed her lips and remained silent for a moment. "You go down and rest, I'll stay with your child." Yunu knew Mrs. Lu's temperament, and if she didn't get up well, she might not be able to sleep a wink. At that moment, she could only bow slightly, close the door and retreat. The room fell silent. Su Buring was not even half asleep, and the indescribable pain on his body would keep him awake for a while. Looking at Mrs. Lu with red eyes, he hesitated and advised softly. "Aunt Lu, I'm really fine. Don't you know it yet? Even the king of hell doesn't dare to accept me. It's not easy even if I want to die. You go back to the house and rest." Mrs. Lu's eyes were very determined. "I won't leave, even if you fall asleep. I won't leave. Your parents gave you to me. If you dare to get into trouble, I will jump into the well and die in front of you." Su Buling was a little helpless. After thinking about it, he moved a little bit to the inside with some effort. "If you stay up late, you won't be beautiful. Lie down for a while. You have to feed me medicine and food tomorrow. How can you be in a bad mood?" Mrs. Lu hesitated for a little while, then kicked off her palace boots, carefully lay down beside Su Buling, hugged Su Buling's arm, and stared at Su Buling's profile. "You go to sleep first, otherwise I can't sleep." Her eyes were firm and clear, with no other thoughts except worry and tenderness. Su Buling didn't expect Madame Lu to be so close to him and hug him. His face turned red and he blinked. "This is not good." Madame Lu frowned slightly. "I am your aunt. If you dare to get into trouble, I will hold you and die together." It's true that Su Buling didn't feel any pain in his body. He felt warm in his heart. He was silent for a moment, then closed his eyes and stopped talking. He only looked towards the direction of the imperial city occasionally. Madame Lu lay on the pillow like this, rarely blinking, and kept looking at Su Buling until the east was white and the cry of spring swallows sounded from outside the window. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Prince is Very Fierce. Author, Guan Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 196. In the long and silent night, the lanterns under the palace eaves emit a dim light. Changal Palace is as deserted as ever, and it seems to be the same as it was 10 years ago, but things have changed a lot. The palace maids have gone to bed, and only the side hall of the Queen Mother's bedroom is still lit. The pillars reflect the light of the candle light, and the red curtains are gently swaying in the night wind. A figure stands in front of the black and white wall, leaving a lonely reflection on the huge peony flower. After returning from Taiji Palace, the Queen Mother stood here, staring blankly at the painting in front of her. A man should live when he should live, and die when he should die. With the national humiliation in front of us, why should the sons of the Su family care about dying? But, there is no other way, only the Queen Mother can save me. If the Queen Mother is unwilling, I will not force her. If the Queen Mother is willing, I will repay her with the rest of my life. All kinds of words echoed in her mind, some of which were said by her and some by Su Buling. Every word shocked her mind, making her, who thought she was steady, restless for a moment. Save Su Buling. If it was just like this, she would agree without any hesitation. The Su family brought peace to the world, and their descendants were infected with serious diseases. As the legitimate daughter of the Xiao family, if she didn't save him, how could she live up to the teachings she had received since childhood? Su Buling stood up for the country today, at the cost of his life, to take back what should have belonged to Daewoo. As the queen mother of Daewoo, if she stood by and watched, how could she live up to the phoenix robe on her body? And she didn't want Su Buling to die. Hongluan couldn't lose Su Buling, her only support. Save him, he must be saved, there is no reason not to save him. The way to save him. The queen mother shook her head with difficulty, and her eyes showed deep entanglement. How could it be possible? How could there be such a method? How could she agree to such an unreasonable detoxification method? She is the daughter of the Xiao family who married out. She was born into a family of nobles. Her ancestors had served as prime ministers for generations. As a descendant, her personal integrity and reputation are more important than her life. She has never lost her integrity in the Deep Palace for 10 years. How could she ruin her reputation for this? She is the queen mother of Daewoo, the mother of a country, the legitimate mother of the current emperor, and a role model for women in the world. She has been conscientiously fulfilling her duties as a queen for 10 years since entering the palace. If she saves Su Buling with this method, how can she live in the world with dignity? The face of the Song family and the face of the Xiao family will all be lost in her hands. Cannot save. Absolutely cannot save. How can she feel at ease if she doesn't save him? Su Buling was originally harmed by a bad person. Now he is loyal to the country and his life is in danger. If she stands by and watches, can she live with dignity, but can she also live with her conscience? It's not okay to save him, and it's not okay not to save him. She is just a woman. What choice should she make? The queen mother clenched her hands tightly, tears burst out of her eyes, her breathing was short, she wanted to be hysterical, but she still maintained her usual demeanor. The night wind was rustling, and the deep palace was cold. Time passed little by little, and there was only one breath in the hall, and the huge peony painting. The queen mother stood in front of the painting, the sun rose and set, and the palace lanterns were lit and extinguished. The maid called out countless times outside the door, and Chiao Yi came in and persuaded her several times and went out again, but she didn't move. I don't know how long it took, the queen mother saw the little man on the table, and the half-string of candied haws in the little man's hand. The little man had a bright smile and held the candied haws. It looked a little ridiculous, but she would never forget it in her life. The picture of handing over the candied haws is still lingering in her mind. Abetuo bookstore. The queen mother's eyes gradually calmed down, and gradually became a little dazed. Looking back, 10 years in the palace are not as worth recalling as the half an hour on the street. The rest of my life will probably be like this. Thinking of this, the queen mother's face suddenly showed some determination. Rather than staying in the palace and dying of old age without anyone knowing, perhaps people who should live should be allowed to live. Su Buling is the prince of Suwang, and he is willing to die for the country, but he should not die at this time. The world is not peaceful, and the disputes of the three kingdoms may sweep the people at any time. We need a Su Lai to shock the monarchs of the three kingdoms and various princes. If Su Buling dies, who will be this person? Su Buling has great talent, knows the honor and disgrace of the people, and has the 12 states of Ziliang to rely on. Who else has this qualification? Compared with the world, what is her life? A man should die when he should. Although she is a woman, she is also the daughter of the Xiao family. She should be as brave as a man. Su Buling can sacrifice his life for the honor of the country, so why should she, a righteous man for the country, cherish her life? I'm sorry to the Song family and the Xiao family. At least she, Xiao Xiang is worthy of the people of the world. The queen mother trembled slightly, snorted sharply, walked quickly to the table, picked up the brush, and wrote lines of words on the white rice paper. I have been in the palace for 10 years. I have been managing the palace and enforcing etiquette. I have no children, but I have fulfilled my duties as a concubine. I have never slacked off for a moment and lived up to the Song family. Our ancestors taught us, the righteousness of the world comes first, etiquette, honor, life and death, reputation, nothing can be abandoned. Su Buling risked his life for the righteousness, and I saved him, living up to the teachings of our ancestors. Su Buling risked his life, so why should I, Xiao Xiang care about my life? I will only die. If my ancestors are in heaven, if you feel that it is not right, I will be a pig, dog, cow or horse in the next life, and I will bear it alone. Swish swish swish. Writing quickly. After the Queen Mother finished writing, she picked up the golden paper cutter, cut her finger, and wrote her name on the rice paper with blood. After that, she returned to the bedroom and took out a bottle of poison and a wine pot from among the dazzling array of ingenious objects. The poison was prepared when she was a widow in the deep palace and was about to go crazy due to loneliness and despair. It has a little flower fragrance and can be relieved in dreams after drinking it, but she finally resisted and did not drink it. She poured the poison into the wine pot, set up an incense table in the main hall of Changal Palace, and lit 3 incense sticks. The Queen Mother, wearing a fiery red phoenix robe, knelt on the futon, lit the blood letter to sacrifice to the ancestors of the Xiao family, and put it in the brazier. I will give you my life in exchange for his. The sin of infidelity shall be paid with my life. The heavens and the earth shall bear witness to this. As the calm words came out, the Queen Mother's troubled eyes gradually calmed down. The rice paper turned into ashes in the flames, and the green smoke rose. The Queen Mother raised her beautiful face and watched the faint green smoke float up, rising to the dome, passing through the eaves and green tiles, and reaching the sky. It was as if the heavy burden on her heart was finally put down. The Queen Mother collapsed, sat sideways on the ground, breathed a sigh of relief, and smiled. She stared blankly upwards. It was the majestic and solemn dome of the hall without any human presence. The green smoke had dissipated between heaven and earth. Perhaps in this way, death is also meaningful. It is better than being locked up alone in the deep palace, looking at the endless loneliness until the day she dies of old age. The prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 197. Thank you to the leader of love is hidden deeply for the reward. Thank you, this prince is not too fierce for the 10,000 reward. Thank you to Mr. Snake Dove for the 10,000 reward. Thank you to Mr. Running Skullbag for the 10,000 reward. After the rain, the sky clears and everything recovers. After a few days, hundreds of flowers were in full bloom in the garden of Prince Su's mansion, spring swallows built new nests under the eaves, and the branches of locust willows sprouted young leaves. The palace was a little more popular because there were more medical maids, but the atmosphere was as peaceful as ever. No one was making any noise, they were just doing their own thing silently. Mrs. Lu has been staying with Su Buling these past few days, even sleeping beside Su Buling at night. The maids and doctors all know about it, but no one has said anything. After all, Mrs. Lu's worries are all people can see it, but Su Buling has difficulty even moving. After 4 or 5 days of training, he can barely be helped to sit up for a while. As for when he can walk on the ground, it depends on God. After a battle at the top of the Taiji Palace, the voices in the market became louder and louder. As promised, the emperor handwritten a gilded plaque of King Kui, paraded through the streets with gongs and drums, and sent it to the palace. However, because the plaque on the middle gate was handwritten by Emperor Xiaozong, yes, it can only be hung on the side door for people to admire. Su Buletinling is well deserved for this golden plaque, and many people in the market are envious of it. However, because Su Buletinling was injured, no one has come to hand over invitations without opening his eyes. Most of the people who have come are old men from the world who come to visit and give away some rare treasures from the mountains and seas. One generation. Song Yufu also came here twice. She wanted to come to visit, but she couldn't get in, so she took a few glances at the door and left. Zhu Manzi was so smart that he applied for a street patrol job and walked around the Prince Su's mansion day and night, but he never had the chance to meet Su Buling. Time passed like this day by day, and it was the end of February in a blink of an eye. At dusk, the luxurious carriage stopped outside the palace gate, and the Queen Mother got out of the carriage with the help of the palace maid. Because she came to visit, the Queen Mother only wore a long red dress with a belt around her waist. She was simple and elegant without too much decoration. She only had a gold hairpin inserted in her bun and a food box on her hand. There was only a jug of wine in the box. See the Queen Mother. The guards and maids came out to salute. The Queen Mother gently raised her hand, walked slowly into the palace, and was led by Yunu to the back house. There was some medicinal smell in the courtyard of the bedroom. Several imperial doctors were sitting in front of the stone table, looking at the piles of books, still thinking about the antidote, all with sad faces. After hearing the news, Mrs. Lu walked out of the room. With 2 black circles on her head, she leaned over and saluted slightly tiredly, "See the Queen Mother." Then she was about to go back without waiting for the Queen Mother to excuse herself. It seemed that she had not taken enough care of the Queen Mother. To calm down. Red Luan. The Queen Mother stopped Mrs. Lu, with a slight smile on her face, walked up to her and said softly, "I heard from the imperial doctor that it won't be a problem for a short time. It's not good for you to stay like this. Go back and rest for a while." Mrs. Lu was indeed a little tired, but after spending the past few days with Su Buling and seeing Su Buling's face getting better little by little, she felt quite relieved. She shook her head. "No, I can hold on." The Queen Mother's expression was as calm as ever. She tilted her head and thought for a moment. "I came here today. Firstly, I was not allowed to visit, and secondly, I heard from the Taoist priest of Kintian prison that the Furong temple outside the city is particularly efficacious. Whether I want to have a son or be safe, I just need to burn incense sticks and it will be fine quickly. I don't know. True and false." Mrs. Lu paused in her steps and was busy taking care of Su Buling. She forgot to burn incense and worship Buddha. She turned around hurriedly. "Really, forget it, how will you know if you don't try?" Then she walked out of the house. "Walk." The hands under the Queen Mother's sleeves tightened slightly, but she still said, a reminder, "It's getting late. We can't come back until tomorrow morning. It won't be too late to come back in a few days." What kind of temper was Mrs. Lu? Finding a way was like finding a life-saving straw. She couldn't wait for more than a quarter of an hour and immediately ran out of the veranda. She turned around and said, "Sooner rather than later. Please take care of me, Queen Mother Ling-er." He felt a little uneasy and hesitant when he said this. The Queen Mother smiled softly, "Don't worry, I'm not that unreliable. I really couldn't stop you last time." Mrs. Lu nodded and said no more. She called for a carriage with her maid, and left the palace without even changing her clothes. Worldwide. The courtyard is quiet and quiet. The Queen Mother walked slowly to the door, her eyes obviously hesitant and entangled, but she was suppressed in an instant, and she turned her head and ordered. "The patient needs to rest." "What are you talking about outside? Go to the outer house and wait. I will call you if anything happens." "Yes." The palace maids and several imperial doctors naturally did not dare to disobey the Queen Mother's wishes, so they bowed slightly and retreated. Lao Xiao was originally standing in the courtyard, but at this time he turned and left the courtyard. The courtyard was quiet, except for the occasional chirping of birds from a distance. The Queen Mother pursed her lips, her expression returned to its usual dignified and tranquil expression, and she raised her hand to push open the bedroom door. Squeak. The door opens and closes. The Queen Mother stood in the room, facing the door. She hesitated for a moment before turning around and looking at the inside of the house. There was a faint smell of medicine floating in the room. Between the curtains, Su Buling was sitting on the bedside. He was only wearing close-fitting white clothes. His long black hair was draped on his back. His peach blossom eyes were clear and moving, with a bit of a smile. The Queen Mother hurriedly turned around again. After thinking about it, she felt something was wrong. She forced herself to calm down and coughed lightly. She put the food box on the table outside and walked slowly towards the back of the house. Greetings to the Queen Mother. The sudden voice frightened the Queen Mother, who was walking with her head down, so much that her shoulders trembled. Her heartbeat was very fast, but her expression did not change at all. She sat down on the stool at a leisurely pace and looked at Su Buling. No need to be polite, are you feeling better? Su Buling's expression was calm, no different from usual, and he nodded gently. The room fell silent. Su Buling did not speak, so the Queen Mother naturally had nothing to say, and only two breathing sounds were left. The Queen Mother gradually felt a little uncomfortable, and she avoided looking at Su Buling's eyes. She didn't know how long she had to hold back the words on her lips before forcing herself to say them. The detoxification method you mentioned last time, is it true or false? How could Su Buling answer? Nodding, if the Queen Mother doesn't want to, don't force it. Everyone has to die, sooner or later. The Queen Mother tightly grasped her skirt, tilted her head and looked at something unknown. After a long silence, she said in a flat tone. You must promise me first, after you recover from your illness and return to your fiefdom, you must treat the people of the world well and not start a war. You must think about the world, not your own life or a throne. Su Buling was silent for a while and took a breath. Okay. The truth. I, Su Buling, always keep my words, just like the Queen Mother said, I will work for the people, not for one family. The Queen Mother bit her lower lip lightly, raised her eyes and glanced at Su Buling, stood up and walked to the window, and looked outside for a few times. There was no one around. The Queen Mother looked a little panicked, and quietly closed the window, looking like a widow who had cheated on her. Well, it seems to be so. The prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 198. Thank you Yishui and Jiaxuan for being the leader of the boss and adding a reward of 30,000. The current debt, 51,329, seems to be rising faster than it can be paid back. The night has fallen quietly, and the lights of thousands of houses are lit up. The spring breeze is blowing slowly in the pavilions and pavilions. A few early spring swallows poke their heads out of the bird's nest and look at the windows that were closed early with some doubts. Ta-ta. Soft steps. In the neat and elegant bedroom, a little medicinal fragrance floats in the air. Xiao Xiang who is wearing a long red dress, looks like she is wearing a wedding dress. Her long hair is coiled on her head, and the curves from her shoulders down are undulating. Together with her slender legs, she outlines a look that is gorgeous without any embellishment. The picture of the most stunning lady, standing inside the room, seems to make even the room without lights a bit brighter. Su Buring sat back, and this time he recognized the rouge model of Xian Zizai's camellia resin on the Queen Mother's lips. Tread. Gong Xie stepped on the carpet, walking slightly unsteadily, and walked to Su Buring and sat down next to him. Xiao Xiang looked very calm with a somewhat mature face, still treating her nephew like an elder, but she could not hide the panic in her eyes. Queen Mother. Don't call me Queen Mother. What's that called? Two people, what are their names? Oh. The whispers made the already weird atmosphere even weirder. Xiao Xiang hesitated, looked at Su Buling a few times, and said to himself, this is to save him for the sake of the people of the world, commit suicide tomorrow, don't think too much. After calming down for a while, Xiao Xiang returned to her usual dignified air. She felt that she should take the initiative as she was older, so she bit her silver teeth and raised her cheek, making a look like the wind is rustling, the water is cold, and the strong man is gone. With a resolute look on his face, he put his hands on his waist and sat still, whispering like a mosquito. You, do it yourself. I don't know how I came out with the sentence of do it yourself. As soon as the words came out, the face that had finally calmed down turned blood red again. Su Buling looked at the charming woman, thought for a while, and prepared to get closer, but it seemed that she was injured, so he gasped and his expression froze. Xiao Xiang'er's expression was tense and she didn't even dare to move with her eyes closed. Su Buletinling's eyelashes trembled every time she breathed, as if she was being tortured. After enduring it for a while, she couldn't hold it any longer. She quietly opened her right eye and took a look. She saw Su Buling staring blankly at her, motionless, a little confused. What's wrong? I'm so shy, it's nothing. Still comforting people at such a time shows how good his psychological quality is. Su Buling was silent for a while, then said helplessly. Well, I'm injured, I can't move. Xiao Xiang'er's face was slightly stiff, a little baffled. The room fell silent, and the atmosphere was extremely awkward. Breathe, 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 breathe. Time passed little by little. Su Buletinling remained motionless and acted innocent. Xiao Xiang'er's face was as red as an apricot, and her expression was very strange. After struggling for a long time, she slowly sat down again and muttered vaguely. What should I do? Su Buletinling spread his hands slightly and asked knowingly. Yeah, what should we do? You are a man. I know I am a man, but I am hurt. Xiao Xiang'er stared at her almond-shaped eyes and sat watching. There was even a bit of sadness and anger in her eyes about what evil she had done in her previous life to encounter such an evil obstacle. A few days ago, she went to the house to unveil the tiles in full swing, and now she is. Xiao Xiang'er hesitated to speak, and finally gritted his teeth, pretending to be calm and said in a soft voice, 918. Well, when I entered the palace, I was taught how to serve people, it seems. Why don't you lie down? Good. Su Buletinling's expression was meticulous, he was very obedient, and he lay down comfortably. Xiao Xiang'er was like killing fish for the first time. She didn't know how to start. Her eyes flickered, her hands pinched the belt around her waist, and she thought for a moment. I saved you because of your words, the country's prestige is before me, why should I, the son of the Su family, wish to die? Don't think wrongly, even if you die, you won't be able to tell this matter to anyone. Su Buling blinked and stared into those extremely beautiful eyes. Just because of this? Nothing else. Xiao Xiang'er's eyes subconsciously dodge, but her expression does not change at all. No, if you think too much, forget it. Su Buling smiled softly, if the Queen Mother doesn't want to, that's all. I'm not that kind of person. Shut up, don't call me Queen Mother, don't call me Queen Mother today. Xiao Xiang'er glared slightly, and with the thought of long-term pain is worse than short-term pain, she raised her hand and opened the laces. The green lotus flowers bloomed, the scenery was not moving, and even the house seemed to be a little warmer. Point. Su Buling coughed lightly, and just when he took a serious look, he heard a trembling voice, close your eyes. When he looked up, he saw the beauty with her arms folded in a fierce look, and he could only feel a little agitated. Close your eyes regretfully. Xiao Xiang'er sat down in front of him again, hesitated for a long time, then stretched out his hand to touch Su Buling's arm, and then retracted it as if he was electrocuted. Su Buling took a few deep breaths and thought about it. Xiang'er. Huh, shut up, no matter how big or small, will you die if you don't speak? Xiao Xiang'er raised her hand and patted Su Buling's shoulder, then continued to study how to kill the fish. Her face gradually flushed, and she carefully untied the tie of Su Buling's collar, looking sideways without looking. Su Buling secretly opened his eyes, shook his head helplessly, thought for a while, held her hand and pulled it lightly. Ah dash. Xiao Xiang'er was unstable and fell on Su Buling's chest. The mind that she had suppressed to keep calm was instantly in chaos. She wanted to get up, but an arm climbed up her waist. Xiao Xiang'er looked down at the face close at hand, twisted anxiously, but froze on the spot the next moment. The four lips touched. The fragrance was as fragrant as orchid, and as warm as honey. Xiao Xiang'er's eyes suddenly widened, and her hands pinched Su Buling's shoulders, a little unbelievable. Su Buling raised his eyebrows, and his eyebrows were curved with a bit of smile. Xiao Xiang'er's breathing was obviously heavier, and she wanted to bite someone, but she held back. She thought to herself, I saved him for the sake of national justice, and I will drink poison tomorrow to commit suicide, don't think too much. After comforting herself, Xiao Xiang'er slowly relaxed. Her originally calm eyes quickly turned into confusion as her mind relaxed, and then gradually turned into a clear spring. What national justice, what seniority, what hierarchy, it seems that I can't remember at this time. The moonlight has fallen in the spring courtyard without knowing when, and the curtains are hanging in the quiet room. Rustle. The thin pants that were in the way were thrown out, but the lotus carp was kept by someone with a caring heart. Under the bright moonlight, a cry of pain dissipated with the night wind outside the house. The newly sprouted branches and willow trees sway gently. Indistinctly, someone seemed to say, "You are really hurt, Queen Mother, you, don't call me Queen Mother." But it was soon covered by the spring breeze, and no sound could be heard. Volume 2, The Lone Wolf Chasing the Phoenix chapter is over. The lone wolf howled at the moon alone by the abyss, and dared to chase the phoenix in the sky. End. Volume 3, The Raging Sea-Slashing Dragon chapter. The black blade pressed down the city, the sword was like the sea, and the sword and belt rang to kill the dragon. Stay tuned. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Prince is Very Fierce. Author, Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 199. After more than a month, the second volume of The Lone Wolf Chasing the Phoenix chapter is finally finished. To be honest, the middle part of the second volume was a bit messy because of the detailed outline changes. From the beginning of writing about the little governor, one volume was exactly 200,000 words, and the deviation would not exceed 5,000 words. As a result, this volume ended up with 250,000 words. The main reason was Gong Sun-ming's problem. Originally, Hu Yanji's team of fake envoys entered Beijing as a plot to investigate the case, and then Gong Sun-ming came out and said that Su Buling knew everything. Like several plots in the first volume, he was forced to pretend, forming an early climax. As a result, he discovered that the method was not pleasing to the eye, and then it was changed. The price of change is very high, one move affects the whole body. The plot of Renayatang is filled with the plot of Xiao Peach Blossom, and then the climax is moved to Yingchun Tower. Because there was no foreshadowing, the plot of Yingchun Tower was not very good. Fu Bao was directly blamed and disappeared for 30 chapters before recovering. Because the second volume is a link between the past and the next, it is relatively dull. It did not build up the climax in the early stage, and the result is that the whole volume seems to be just daily life. Although daily life is okay, it just happened to be on the shelves, and it was naked on the shelves. It was painful to cancel the order. Well, the second volume is summed up in one sentence, which is, Su Buling found clues from the case file library and set his sights on the imperial city, but found nothing. Then Zhongli Chuchu provided an unexpected piece of news, thus detoxifying. The key to this volume lies in the news about Zhongli Chuchu. From this point on, the protagonist deviates from the predetermined track and goes his own way. In the eyes of the planners, Su Buletinling was in a checkmate state with no way out. This is still the case so far. But the unexpected news sent by Zhongli Chuchu widened the information gap, causing Su Buling to not go down the road planned by the planner, but to run to the Queen Mothers. If a chess player does not know where his pieces are, the consequences can be imagined. Let's save these for the third volume. Then there are several controversial points in the second volume. Let's not talk about Yingchun Tower. There are no problems in handling it, but the plot arrangement is not good, which makes Fubao take the blame. Then the Little Peach Blossom. Little Peach Blossom may not appear until a later stage. After all, it takes time to grow up. By then, she will probably be like, holding an iron gun and carrying a gold ingot, a favor to be repaid, and a blood revenge to be avenged. Such a ruthless character. Furthermore, it was just a matter of going into the palace alone. There was no problem in killing Jia Yi for the first time. It was indeed a bit too reckless to go and kill the emperor the second time, but it was just a test, with the intention of trying his luck, and, some storylines must be it's more unreasonable. If it were reasonable, I wouldn't be able to see the Queen Mother. This is more reasonable than seeing the princess taking a wild bath in the wilderness. After the new year, there is basically no big plot, such as the arrangement of various roles. There is a reason why Nang Qingyi has no sense of presence, because the following chapters are relatively long, and each heroine, including Zhu Manzi, Song Yufu and other basic. There is also a big plot in the film, so I won't go into details here. At the end of the decisive battle at the top of Tai Chi, to be honest, I really wanted to write the feeling of on a full moon night, on top of the Forbidden City, a sword coming from the west, a flying fairy from the sky, but it's a pity that Gulong's level is too high. It must be it's not as good as it is, but it still fulfills a small wish. There is also it's a bit funny for the civil and military officials of the two countries and the Manchu dynasty to pay attention to a small competition. Let me explain this, to paraphrase a book friend's explanation. My country's table tennis is number 1 in the world, and the top players are all the national team. Just like one day, a person went to the bird's nest, and in front of the whole country, he won the first place in 3 games, and said that's it. Obviously it cannot be called a child's play. According to the setting, all the people in Dayu are martial arts, and they have maintained a great power in the Central Plains. There are many heroes. Suddenly, a barbarian comes to the door, and he is raped in front of the emperor's eyes. The emperor himself has to award the award. If this is all considered a child's play by the emperor, the marriage is just to marry a girl, and the tribute is just a little money. There is so much money, women are everywhere, and there is no shortage of this little bit. If there is no war, if the military expenditure is cut, maybe I can still give it to the old man. It is very auspicious for Lord Buddha to build a garden. The focus of this competition is not on martial arts. To put it bluntly, it is just one breath. As the saying goes, every inch of mountains and rivers is an inch of blood. No matter how small a thing is in front of the country, it cannot be trampled on. The Queen Mother also taught, a man should live when he should be alive, and die when he should die. A true man is bound to die for his country when it is time to do so, and he must endure the humiliation and live even when he cannot die. There is no need to give examples. There are so many heroes and ancestors in ancient times, so there is no need to give examples. The Queen Mother taught Su Buletinling that there was no problem in letting him look away from the uncurable dragon locking Gu and pay attention to things that the feudal king should pay attention to. Taking a step back, live when you deserve to live, and die when you deserve to die are all the same. The murderer of Su Buling's poison has not been found. Unavenged revenge should not mean that he has to grit his teeth and endure humiliation and live. How can it be understood that the Queen Mother asked Su Buling to order to die? As for why the Queen Mother saved Su Buling, I won't go into details. Anyway, the Queen Mother would definitely not have saved Su Buling if it were another person to fight in the Tai Chi Palace. Some things would be meaningless to write. The third volume, The Furious Sea and the Slaying of Dragons, is the conclusion of the Chang'an volume. I don't know how many words there are, but I estimate that I can't finish it at 200,000 words. That's it for now, leave the rest for the next volume summary. In order to keep the chapter going today, I sent it all out, not a drop is left. There are a lot of things to prepare in the early stage of a new volume. Please forgive me if the update is slow in the past few days. Once it is smoothed out, updates will begin. Finally, I would like to ask for some monthly recommendation votes, thank you all. The Prince is Very Fierce. Author, Guan Zi. Chapter 200. Russell. The fine and dense spring rain came silently, hitting the windows and eaves, making a dripping sound. The early birds looked at the rain curtain blankly, jumping between the beams under the eaves, and occasionally chirping. Chirp. The east was already white. The woman, who had been tired all night, was awakened by the noisy birdsong. She stretched out her slender white arms from the quilt and rubbed her eyes in a daze. Woo! It was not bright and there was no light. It was gray in the eyes. I could only see the top of the curtain. My whole body was warm, but I felt a little sore, especially. The Empress Dowager's blank eyes gradually became clear, and the fire clouds gradually rose to her cheeks, which were still a little red. The laziness on her face slowly turned into stiffness. How did I fall asleep? This is Su Buling. The Empress Dowager froze all over, and finally realized where she was and what happened. I came here at dusk yesterday, and was going to leave at night, and then take poisoned wine to the tomb of the previous emperor to commit suicide. How come it's already dawn in a blink of an eye? The Queen Mother's eyes were panicked, and she was about to turn over, but she didn't expect that the strange feeling on her body came over, making her beautiful eyes look a little sad. Her brows were tightly furrowed, and she couldn't help but hum. The Queen Mother looked a little confused, not knowing why she became like this. She only remembered lying on Su Buling's chest, and then being kissed, and then she was confused and couldn't remember clearly. Last night. I rode first, I was very tired and sore. Su Buling suddenly could move, beg for mercy, good brother. The messy pictures and unspeakable words flooded into her mind, and the Queen Mother widened her eyes, a little unbelievable. This crazy woman is me? Is it a dream? No. The Queen Mother bit her lower lip, and her eyes showed a little shame and anger. She was a virgin, so it was impossible for her to dream so detailed. That damn boy dared to kiss everywhere, and he couldn't be pushed away. He ignored her even when she begged for mercy, and he seemed to roll his eyes. Then I can't remember clearly. She fainted. The Queen Mother's eyes were a little surprised. They said she couldn't move. How could he make her faint, and he didn't show any mercy to her? This evil creature. The Queen Mother's consciousness gradually became clear, and the pain in her body gradually dissipated. She found that she was lying face down. She wanted to turn around and scold her, but she stopped as soon as she moved. It was a bit difficult to face. After all, no matter how strong a woman is, she won't be very brave at this time. The Queen Mother pursed her lips, grabbed the quilt with her hands, and didn't dare to feel the movement behind her. I'm afraid he's still asleep. The person has been rescued anyway, why not get up quietly and then go to the Imperial Mausoleum to commit suicide? I don't know if the poison has been cured. It must have been cured. If not, he must be lying to me. Let's just leave quietly. Thinking of this, the Queen Mother's eyes showed some determination, and she was ready to get up quietly, but for some reason, she was reluctant to leave the warm quilt. As soon as she had this thought, the Queen Mother's face showed some panic, and she forced herself to calm down and scolded a few words in her heart. Xiao Xiang you have made a big mistake. How can you live up to your ancestors if you don't die? If you are discovered, you will be scolded as the lewd queen for hundreds and thousands of years. Thinking of the poisonous oath she made, the queen mother's mind was cleared of all the messy thoughts, her eyes were determined and relieved, she slowly lifted the quilt, tidied up the messed up lotus carp, and turned her head to look outside with a calm expression. The quilt was empty. The curtain was slightly opened. Through the curtain, one can see a tall man standing by the table in the grey room, with long hair like a waterfall, holding a wine jug in his hand and drinking from it, the cool wine seeping out from the corner of his mouth and falling to the ground. Gurgle gurgle. Queen Mother. Hiss, don't Xiao Buling, spit it out quickly. The night is about to end, before sunrise. A faint light penetrated through the window paper. The early morning of the end of February was still a little cold. The air in the curtain was still a little sweet, and the warmth and ups and downs on the arm were very clear. Su Buling blinked his tired eyes and breathed a sigh of relief. After all, it was an experiment to detoxify, and the result, it wasn't bad anyway. But Su Buling was indeed injured in front of the Taiji Hall, and he almost risked his life again last night. The Queen Mother might have a heavy psychological burden. She was obviously relaxed and cooperated because of her full juice, but her mental defense was very strong. She always avoided his eyes, was shy, and was busy serving him, just like doing a job. Su Buling had no choice but to go into battle with injuries. He basically used all the tricks he knew in his previous life on the Queen Mother, which made her roll her eyes unconsciously, she even cried. To be honest, he still felt distressed. Su Buling sighed softly and tilted his head to look at the woman sleeping on his arm. Because she was facing away from him, he could only see her side face and ears, which were still red. Although she had a noble status and seniority, the Queen Mother was actually not very old. She was considered a little girl in her previous life. Su Buling felt embarrassed from the bottom of his heart for carrying a psychological burden and being abused without any lightness, but an apology was too fake, so he could only make up for it slowly in the future. It was just getting light, and there were 8 death warriors guarding outside the courtyard, and no one would come in to disturb them. Su Buling stared at it carefully for a moment. They didn't close their eyes last night. Both of them sweated a lot and their mouths were a little dry. After thinking for a moment, Su Buling couldn't bear to wake up the Queen Mother who had just fallen asleep. He gently pulled away his arms, stood up, put on his boots, and searched around the room. The wine gourd at hand was empty after I drank a lot last night while running errands and gave the Queen Mother a few gulps. Su Buling had a headache, and he couldn't ask his servants to come in. He could only support his body and put away the scattered clothes on the floor, then walk slowly through the partition and came to the round table outside. There is a food box on the table. Su Buling raised his eyebrows, thinking that the Queen Mother was looking at what he had brought, so he opened it and took a look. There was indeed a bottle of wine inside. A slight smile appeared on Su Buling's lips, and he felt warm in his heart. I picked up the small flask, opened the cork and smelled it. The taste was a bit light and had a slight floral aroma. I had never drunk it before. Su Buling blinked his eyes, brought it to his mouth and took a sip, and his eyes lit up. Soft entrance, thin throat. Oh. Although the taste is a bit weird, there is nothing to worry about since the Queen Mother sacrificed her life to save him last night. Su Buling raised the flask and drank, the sweet wine slipped into his throat, and he felt comfortable all over. Rustling. Just after taking a few sips, there was a sound from behind. Su Buling put down the wine bottle and wiped his mouth, then looked back. The Queen Mother opened her eyes wide and looked at him blankly. Soon his expression turned into one of panic. He took a deep breath, waved his hands dancingly, driving the rough waves in front of him, and said incoherently. Hiss, don't, little Buling, spit it out. Su Buling frowned slightly and blinked in confusion. What's the matter?